The mining station called Refuge floated in the black space like a broken toy. Its metal walls had big holes in them from the enemy guns. Inside the station, 300 people from different worlds waited to die. They came from 7 different species, but now they all looked the same when they were scared. Commander Thale pressed his face against the cracked window and looked at the enemy ships. The raiders had been attacking for 6 days now. They did not want to kill everyone quickly. They wanted to take prisoners and sell them as slaves. That was worse than death for most people. The station shook again as another blast hit the outer wall. Thale heard people crying in the halls behind him. Some were praying to their gods. Others just held their children close and whispered that everything would be okay, even though they knew it was not true. Dr. Nira ran past him with a toolbox in her hands. She was the smartest person on the station and the only reason they still had air to breathe. The life support systems had been damaged 3 days ago, but she fixed them with spare parts from broken machines. Her blue skin was covered in grease, and her 4 arms moved fast as she worked. Captain Rex came up the stairs from the lower levels. He used to be a smuggler before he got too old for that kind of work. Now he helped people escape through the secret passages he knew about. His face was covered in sweat and dust. How many more can you get out through the maintenance tunnels? Thale asked him. Rex shook his head. The tunnels are blocked now. The raiders put guards at every exit. We are trapped like rats in a box. Another explosion shook the station. This one was closer. Thale could smell smoke in the air. The raiders were getting ready for their final attack. They would come inside the station soon and take everyone who was still alive. Thale walked to the communication room. The radio was old and broken, but it still worked sometimes. He had been sending messages for help for 6 days. The Galactic Defense Coalition was supposed to protect places like this, but they were too far away and too busy with their own problems. He turned on the radio one more time. His voice was tired when he spoke into the microphone. This is Commander Thale at Refuge Station. We have 300 civilians trapped here. The raiders will break through our defenses in a few hours. We need help now. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. The radio made static noises, but no one answered. Thale was not surprised. No one had answered for 6 days. The coalition ships were all fighting battles in other parts of the galaxy. The outer rim was on its own like always. Dr. Nira came into the room. Her breathing was fast and her eyes were wide with fear. The main power core is failing. I can fix it, but I need more time, maybe 2 hours. We do not have 2 hours, Thale said. He pointed at the window where they could see the raider ships moving closer. They are getting ready to board us. The enemy ships were ugly things made from pieces of different ships welded together. They had big guns and thick armor. The raiders painted them with the blood of their victims. The ships looked like monsters from a nightmare. Captain Rex ran into the room. They are launching boarding pods. I count 20 of them coming our way. Thale grabbed his weapon and checked that it was loaded. He had been a soldier for 30 years, but he had never faced anything like this. The raiders were not normal pirates. They were animals who enjoyed hurting people. They would torture the prisoners before they sold them. The lucky ones would die quickly. Get everyone to the central hub, Thale ordered. We will make our last stand there. The 3 of them ran through the corridors of the station. They passed families hiding in storage rooms and wounded people lying on the floor. Everyone looked at them with hope in their eyes. They wanted Thale to tell them that help was coming, but he could not lie to them now. The central hub was the strongest part of the station. It had thick walls and only 2 ways in. If they could hold this room, they might last a few more hours, but Thale knew it would not matter. The raiders had better weapons and more men. This was just a way to die fighting instead of on their knees. The boarding pods hit the station with loud crashes. Thale heard the sound of cutting tools working through the metal walls. The raiders would be inside soon. He looked around the room at the faces of the people he was supposed to protect. Old people, young people, children who did not understand what was happening. Listen to me, he said to them. Help is not coming. The coalition cannot reach us. in time, but we are not going to give up. We are going to fight. Some of us might die, but we will not let them take us without a fight. A little girl with green skin tugged on his uniform. Will the heroes come to save us like in the stories? Thale knelt down and looked into her big eyes. He wanted to tell her that heroes were just stories, that the galaxy was a cold place where the strong took what they wanted from the weak, but he could not destroy her hope. That was all they had left. Maybe, he said softly, maybe the heroes will come? The sound of the cutting tools got louder. Soon the raiders would break through the walls. Thale stood up and raised his weapon. Around him, the other defenders did the same. They were not soldiers, but they would fight like soldiers. They would show the raiders that some people could not be broken. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in and bathed everything in red light. In the distance, Thale could hear the raiders laughing as they came closer. They thought this would be easy. They thought the people of Refuge Station would just surrender. They were wrong. The first raider came through the hole in the wall. Thale shot him. The second raider jumped over his friend's body. Rex shot him. More raiders came through the hole. The battle for Refuge Station had begun, but even as they fought, Thale knew they could not win. There were too many raiders and too few defenders. In a few hours it would all be over. The raiders would have their slaves and Refuge Station would be another name on the list of places that the galaxy had forgotten, unless the heroes really did come like in the stories. The raider fleet looked like a pack of metal wolves floating in space. 43 ships of different sizes and shapes, all painted with the same dark red color that looked like dried blood. They belonged to the Crimson Tide, the most feared pirate group in the outer rim of the galaxy. War Chief Grendel stood on the bridge of his flagship. The ship was huge, almost as big as a coalition battleship, but it was covered in spikes and guns that made it look like a floating fortress. Grendel was a giant of a man with scars covering his face and arms. Each scar told the story of a battle he had won and a world he had conquered. How much longer until we break through their defenses? He asked his second-in-command. The smaller man looked at his screens and smiled. Maybe 1 hour, War Chief. The station's weapons are almost out of power. Their shields are failing, Grendel laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. He had been raiding for 20 years and he had never lost a battle. The coalition was too weak to stop him. The local defense forces were too scared to fight him. The outer rim belonged to him now. Tell the boarding teams to get ready, he ordered. I want the young ones taken alive. Kill the old ones if they fight back. Break anyone who tries to be a hero. The boarding teams were not normal soldiers. They were hunters who enjoyed their work. Some of them had been pirates for so long they had forgotten what it was like to be human. Others had joined the Crimson Tide because they liked hurting people. All of them were very good at what they did. The team leaders gathered in the main hangar bay. They checked their weapons and armor while Grendel talked to them over the ship's communication system. His voice echoed through the metal halls like the growl of a hungry beast. This is just another mining station full of soft civilians, he told them. They have a few guards, but nothing we cannot handle. Take what you want, but remember that live prisoners are worth more than dead ones. The slave markets are paying good prices for healthy workers. The raiders cheered and banged their weapons against their armor. They had done this hundreds of times before. They knew exactly how to break the will of their prisoners. First they would kill the leaders. Then they would hurt anyone who tried to resist. Finally, they would load the survivors onto their ships and take them to the slave markets. Captain Voss was the leader of the first boarding team. He was a thin man with cold eyes and hands that never stopped moving. He had been a torturer for the coalition before he decided that piracy paid better. Now he used his skills to break prisoners who would not cooperate. Load the pods, he ordered his men. Remember, we want them scared but not dead. Scared prisoners are easier to control. The boarding pods were small ships designed for one purpose. They would fly fast across the space between the raider fleet and the station. Then they would crash through the station's hull and let the raiders Inside, it was a dangerous job, but the raiders did not care about danger. They only cared about the prizes waiting for them. As the pods launched, Grendel watched from his bridge. He had done this so many times that it was almost boring now. The people on the station would fight for a little while. Then they would realize that fighting was hopeless. Then they would surrender and beg for their lives, but Grendel did not feel mercy. He had learned long ago that mercy was weakness. The galaxy was full of predators and prey. The Crimson Tide were predators. Everyone else was prey. "War Chief," his communications officer called out. "I am picking up a strange signal." Grendel walked over to the communication station. The officer was a young woman with nervous hands and a scared look in her eyes. She had joined the Crimson Tide because her homeworld had been destroyed and she had nowhere else to go. "What kind of signal?" Grendel asked. "I do not know. It is not coming from the station. It is coming from somewhere else in the system." Far away, Grendel looked at the long-range sensors. They showed empty space for millions of kilometers in every direction. There were no other ships in the system. There were no planets or moons that could hide a fleet. "It is probably just sensor noise," he said. "Keep watching the station. Let me know when the boarding teams break through." But even as he said it, Grendel felt something cold touch his spine. He had survived for 20 years by trusting his instincts. Right now, his instincts were telling him that something was wrong. The system was supposed to be empty. The Coalition did not patrol this far out. Local defense forces did not have ships that could travel this distance. So what was making that signal? The boarding pods hit the station with loud crashes. Grendel could hear his teams reporting over the radio as they cut through the station's hull. Everything was going according to plan. The station's defenders were fighting back, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. "First team is inside," Captain Voss reported. "Light resistance. We are moving toward the central hub." "Second team is through the hull," another team leader called out. "We found a group of civilians hiding in the storage areas." "Taking them now?" Grendel smiled. Soon the station would be his. The prisoners would be loaded onto his ships and taken to the slave markets. The Crimson Tide would be richer and more feared than ever, but the cold feeling in his spine was getting stronger. He looked at the sensor display again. The strange signal was still there. It was getting stronger too, like something was moving closer to them. "Send out a patrol?" he ordered. "I want to know what is out there." Two small raider ships broke away from the fleet and headed toward the source of the signal. Their sensors were better than the flagship's sensors. If there was something hiding in the dark, they would find it. Grendel watched them go and tried to push away the cold feeling. He had faced coalition fleets before. He had fought against planetary defense forces. He had even survived attacks from other pirate groups. Nothing could threaten the Crimson Tide now, but as he watched the patrol ships disappear into the black space, he remembered something he had heard years ago. A story that other pirates told in quiet voices when they thought no one was listening. A story about ships that came out of nowhere to hunt the hunters. Ships that belonged to a species that most people thought was too civilized to be dangerous. Ships from Earth. Grendel shook his head. Earth was far away. Humans did not operate in the Outer Rim. They were too busy with their own problems to care about what happened to a mining station full of aliens, but the cold feeling would not go away. And somewhere in the dark, something was moving closer to the Crimson Tide. In the deep black of space, far beyond where any normal sensors could reach, something was watching. It had been waiting in the dark for hours, listening to the radio signals from Refuge Station, the desperate calls for help, the sounds of battle, the fear in the voices of people who thought they were going to die. The first sign that something was coming was a ripple in space itself. Like a rock dropped into still water, the fabric of reality bent and twisted. Then another ripple appeared. Then another. Soon there were dozens of them, each one followed by a flash of light that hurt to look at. What came out of those ripples would have made the raiders stop laughing if they had seen it. 12 ships that looked like they had been built in the nightmares of humanity's enemies. Each ship was black as the space around it, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. They moved without sound, like sharks swimming through an ocean of stars. The ships had no bright colors or fancy decorations. They carried no flags or symbols except for small letters on their hulls that spelled out 3 words, Earth Defense Force. Those words were enough to make pirates across the galaxy wake up screaming from their sleep. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the lead ship, a vessel called Retribution. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war. Her face was covered in small scars from battles fought in places that most people had never heard of. Each scar was a reminder of someone she had failed to save. Signal from Refuge Station is getting weaker, her communications officer reported. The raiders are breaking through their defenses. Kane nodded but did not speak. She had been hunting the Crimson Tide for 3 years, following their trail of destruction across 17 star systems. Every time she got close, they would disappear into the dark spaces between the stars. Every time she arrived at a scene of their crimes, she would find only empty ships and broken dreams, but not today. Today she had found them while they were still busy with their work. Today there would be justice. Status report, she ordered. All ships are in position, her tactical officer replied. Weapons are charged and ready. Stealth systems are holding steady. The raiders have no idea we are here. Kane walked to the main display screen and looked at the tactical situation. The raider fleet was spread out around the mining station like a pack of wolves around a wounded deer. They were confident, hairless. They thought they were the only predators in this system. They were wrong. Captain West, King called out to her second-in-command. What do we know about the civilians on that station? West was a young man with quick hands and a sharp mind. He had joined the Earth Defense Force after his home colony was destroyed by slavers. Like many of the crew, he had personal reasons for hunting pirates. 300 civilians from 7 different species, he reported, mostly miners and their families. No military targets except for a few coalition guards. Kane closed her eyes for a moment. 300 innocent people trapped between the pirates and the cold vacuum of space. 300 people who had done nothing wrong except live in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the raiders? 43 ships, mostly converted cargo vessels with added weapons and armor. The flagship is a modified coalition battleship. Crew strength estimated at 2,000. Kane opened her eyes. 2,000 pirates against 12 human ships. The numbers did not matter. What mattered was that innocent people needed help, and the Earth Defense Force was here to give it to them. The raiders are launching boarding pods, the tactical officer reported. They will be inside the station in minutes. Kane felt the familiar cold anger settle in her chest. She had felt it for the first time 20 years ago when pirates had attacked her homeworld. She had felt it every time she saw the aftermath of their crimes. It was an anger that burned without heat, sharp and clean like a blade made of ice. All ships, this is Admiral Kane, she said into her communication system. The enemy is engaged with civilian targets. We go in fast and hard, no survivors among the raiders, no exceptions. The acknowledgments came back from 11 other ships. Each captain had their own reasons for being here. Some had lost family to pirates. Others had seen too many crime scenes like this one. All of them were ready to do what needed to be done. Kane looked at the tactical display one more time. The raider fleet was positioned perfectly for what she had in mind. They were spread out and focused on the station. Their sensors were pointed toward their target instead of watching for threats from behind. Begin the attack, she ordered. The 12 ships of the Earth Defense Force dropped their stealth systems and lit up their weapons. They moved forward like a pack of hunting wolves, their formation perfect and their purpose clear. Each ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, built with technology that most species could only dream about. The weapons they carried were not designed to disable or capture. They were designed to kill quickly and efficiently. The humans had learned long ago that some enemies could not be reasoned with or reformed. Some enemies could only be destroyed. As the human fleet closed in on the raiders, Kane allowed herself a small smile. The Crimson Tide had spent years hunting the weak and defenseless. Now they were about to learn what it felt like to be hunted by something stronger than themselves. "Target the flagship first," she ordered. "Then work your way through the rest of the fleet. Remember, we are not here to capture prisoners. We are here to send a message." The message was simple. "Touch the innocent, and Earth's most feared fleet will come for you. Hunt the defenseless and become the hunted." The galaxy was about to be reminded why humanity had earned its reputation as the species that other species called when they needed monsters killed. The attack was about to begin. The first sign of trouble came when the Crimson Tide sensors started screaming. War Chief Grendel looked at the tactical display and felt his blood turn to ice. 12 new contacts had appeared on the screen, seemingly out of nowhere. Ships that moved like living things, their hulls darker than the space around them. "Where did they come from?" he shouted at his sensor officer. The young woman's hands shook as she worked her controls. "I do not know, War Chief. They were not there. A moment ago, it is like they appeared from thin air." Grendel stared at the display. The new ships were arranged in a perfect attack formation, moving toward his fleet with deadly precision. Their design was unlike anything he had seen before. Sleek and predatory, they looked like they had been built for one purpose: killing. "What species are they?" he demanded. His intelligence officer, a nervous man with twitching eyes, checked his database. When he looked up, his face was pale with fear. "The computer says they are human ships, War Chief." "But that cannot be right. Humans do not operate in this sector." Grendel felt the cold touch of fear creep up his spine. He had heard stories about human ships that appeared from nowhere to hunt pirates. Stories that other raiders told in whispered voices when they thought no one was listening. He had always dismissed them as myths, tales made up to frighten new recruits, but the ships on his screen were very real. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let me talk to them." The main screen flickered, and then showed the face of a human woman. She had gray hair and cold eyes that looked like they had seen too much death. Her uniform was plain black with no decorations except for a small badge that read Defense Force. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady, like someone ordering dinner instead of declaring war. "This is Admiral Kane of the Earth Defense Force. You are surrounded. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded or be destroyed where you stand." Grendel tried to force a laugh, but it came out as more of a croak. "You are outnumbered, human. I have 43 ships. You have 12. Do the math." Kane's expression did not change. "Math is not the issue here. You have been preying on innocent civilians. That ends now. And who is going to stop me? You?" Grendel's voice got stronger as his anger overcame his fear. "I am War Chief of the Crimson Tide. I have been raiding for 20 years. I have destroyed coalition fleets. I have burned entire worlds." "I know what you have done," Kane replied. "I have been following your trail for 3 years. Every ship you have destroyed. Every world you have burned. Every innocent person you have killed or enslaved. Today you pay for all of it." Grendel cut the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. "All ships, attack formation. Show these humans what happens when they threaten the Crimson Tide." The raider fleet opened fire with everything they had. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the human ships. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. It should have been enough to vaporize 12 ships, no matter how advanced they were, but something impossible happened. The human ships simply were not there anymore. They had moved so fast that the raider weapons hit empty space. Then they reappeared in new positions, closer to the raider fleet. "What kind of engines do they have?" Grendel whispered. Before anyone could answer, the human ships returned fire. Their weapons were unlike anything the raiders had ever seen. Beams of pure energy that seemed to bend space itself. Missiles that changed direction in mid-flight to chase their targets. Explosions that burned brighter than stars. The first raider ship to die was a converted cargo hauler on the edge of the formation. The human weapons hit it and it simply came apart, its hull melting like ice in a fire. The second ship tried to run, but a human missile caught it and turned it into a cloud of glowing gas. "Shields!" Grendel screamed. "Raise the shields!" But the shields were not enough. The human weapons cut through them like they were made of paper. Ships that had survived dozens of battles were destroyed in seconds. The raiders' return fire seemed to have no effect on the human vessels at all. Captain Voss called in from his boarding pod. "War Chief, we are inside the station. Do you want us to continue the attack?" Grendel looked at the tactical display. Half his fleet was already gone. The human ships were moving through his formation like sharks through a school of fish. Every few seconds another raider ship would disappear in a ball of fire. "Abort the boarding," he ordered. "Get back to the ships." We were leaving, but it was too late. The human ships had surrounded the entire raider fleet. Every time a pirate ship tried to run, it would find its path blocked by one of the dark vessels. The humans were not just attacking. They were hunting, Admiral. Kane's voice came over the radio again. "This is your final warning. Surrender now or face the consequences." Grendel's response was to target the mining station with his main guns. If he was going to die, he would take the civilians with him. But before he could fire, something hit his ship so hard that it threw him across the bridge. When he got back to his feet, he saw that his main weapons were gone. The human ships had surgically removed them without damaging the rest of his vessel. It was a level of precision that should have been impossible in the middle of a battle. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "the other ships are requesting permission to surrender." Grendel looked around his bridge. Half his crew was dead or wounded, his weapons were destroyed, his engines were failing. The flagship of the mighty Crimson Tide was helpless. "No surrender," he growled. "We fight to the end." But his crew had enough. They had signed up to raid helpless merchants and defenseless colonies. They had not signed up to face humanity's most feared fleet. One by one, they began to lay down their weapons. Admiral Kane watched from her bridge as the last of the raider ships went silent. The battle had lasted 17 minutes. Of the 43 ships that had made up the Crimson Tide, only Twisted Metal remained. The pirates who had terrorized the Outer Rim for years were gone. "Signal the station," she ordered. "Tell them we are sending boarding parties to help with the wounded." As the human ships moved toward Refuge Station, Kane allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Justice had been served. The innocent had been protected. The galaxy was a slightly safer place, but she knew that somewhere out there, other pirates were still hunting. Other innocents were still crying for help. The work of the Earth Defense Force was never done. The silence that followed the battle was deeper than the vacuum of space itself. Commander Thale stood in the central hub of Refuge Station, his weapons still raised, waiting for the next wave of raiders to break through the barricades, but no. One came. The sounds of fighting from the corridors had stopped. The screaming had stopped. Everything had stopped. "What happened?" Dr. Nera whispered. Her forearms were shaking as she held a makeshift weapon. "Why did they stop attacking?" "Captain." Rex was pressed against the wall near the entrance, listening for footsteps in the hallway. "Maybe they are planning something? Maybe they are bringing bigger weapons." But Thale was looking at the small window that showed the space outside the station. Where once there had been 43 raider ships, now there was only debris. Pieces of metal and plastic floating in the dark like the remains of a bad dream. "The raiders are gone," he said quietly. "Gone?" Dr. Nera moved to the window and looked out. "But how is that possible? There were so many of them." Before Thale could answer, the station's communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in. Clear, simple words that carried the weight of absolute authority. "Refuge Station, this is Admiral Kane of the Earth Defense Force. The hostile fleet has been neutralized. We are sending teams to assist with medical care and evacuation. Please respond." Thale stared at the radio like it was a ghost. Earth Defense Force. He had heard that name before, always in whispered conversations between veteran soldiers. Stories of human ships that appeared from nowhere to hunt the worst criminals in the galaxy. Stories that most people thought were just myths. "This is Commander Thale," he said into the microphone. "We have wounded civilians and structural damage throughout the station. Thank you for your assistance." "Copy that, Commander." "Our teams are on their way." The next few minutes felt like a dream. Thale heard the sound of metal cutting through the station's hull, but this time it was different. Precise and careful instead of brutal and destructive. The humans were making their own entrance instead of using the holes that the raiders had torn in the walls. The first human soldier to appear was a woman in powered armor that seemed to drink in the light around it. Her face was hidden behind a helmet, but when she spoke, her voice was calm and professional. "I am Colonel Hart. Are there any wounded who need immediate medical attention?" Thale pointed toward the corner where several injured people were lying on makeshift beds. "We have about 30 wounded. Some are in bad shape." Colonel Hart nodded and spoke into her helmet radio. "Medical team to the central hub. Multiple casualties." She turned back to Thale. "We will have them stabilized and transferred to our medical bay within the hour." More human soldiers entered the room. They moved with the smooth efficiency of people who had done this many times before. They did not waste time with questions or explanations. They simply found the wounded and began treating them with equipment that looked decades ahead of anything the Coalition used. Dr. Nira watched in fascination as a human medic worked on a badly injured miner. The human's tools seemed to heal wounds just by touching them. Within minutes, the miner was sitting up and talking. "How is that possible?" she asked. The medic looked up briefly. "Nanomedical technology. The healing units repair tissue at the cellular level." He went back to work without another word. Captain Rex approached Colonel Hart. "Are you going to ask us about what happened here, about why we were attacked?" Hart shook her head. "That is not our concern. Our concern is making sure you are all safe and healthy." "But do you not want to know about the raiders, about their base locations or their other targets?" "The raiders are no longer a threat," Hart replied. "There are no other targets." Rex looked confused. "But there were dozens of ships, hundreds of pirates. They cannot all be dead." Hart's helmet turned toward the window where the debris of the raider fleet was still floating. "Yes, they can." The evacuation proceeded with military precision. The humans had brought medical ships that could treat the wounded, and transport ships that could carry the civilians to safety. They worked quickly but carefully, making sure that no one was left behind. As the last of the wounded were carried to the human medical bay, Dr. Nira approached Admiral Kane. The human commander had come aboard the station to oversee the evacuation. "Personally, I have to ask," Dr. Nira said, "why did you come? Earth does not have treaties with most of our species. You gain nothing from helping us." Kane looked at her with eyes that had seen too much war. "We came because you called for help. That is what humans do. But you must have been far away." "How did you get here so fast?" Kane smiled slightly. "We were not far away. We were hunting the Crimson Tide. We have been hunting them for 3 years." 3 years? Dr. Nira's eyes widened. "But why? What did they do to you?" "It is not what they did to us," Kane replied. "It is what they did to others." "What they did to people like you?" Commander Thale joined the conversation. "I do not understand. The Coalition is supposed to protect the Outer Rim. Why were humans doing their job?" Kane's expression hardened. "The Coalition does what it can with what it has. But there are places where the Coalition cannot reach. People who need help that will never come through official channels. That is where we operate. But how do you know where to go? How do you know who needs help?" "We listen," Kane said simply. "We listen to every distress call, every cry for help, every desperate message sent into the void. When someone calls for help and no one else answers, we answer." The evacuation was complete within 4 hours. The wounded were stable, and the civilians were safe aboard the human transport ships. The station itself was badly damaged, but the humans had repaired the life support systems and sealed the hull breaches. As the human fleet prepared to leave, Commander Thale stood on the bridge of one of their ships. Through the viewports he could see Refuge Station growing smaller in the distance. It looked different now. Not like a place where people had nearly died, but like a place where people had been saved. "Where will you go now?" he asked Admiral Kane. Kane was studying a star chart filled with red markers. Each marker represented a distress call, a place where people needed help. "There are others who need our assistance." "There are always others. Will we see you again?" Kane looked at him with those tired eyes. "Hopefully not. If you see us again, it means something terrible has happened." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind only the debris of the raider ships and a story that would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The story of the day when Earth's most feared fleet had appeared from nowhere to save 300 innocent people. In the days that followed, the Outer Rim became a different place. Pirates who had operated with impunity for years found themselves looking over their shoulders. Slavers who had thought themselves untouchable began to have nightmares about dark ships appearing in their wake. The legend of the Ghost Fleet was no longer just a story. It was a promise written in the wreckage of those who had chosen to prey upon the weak. A promise that echoed through the galaxy, "Touch the innocent, and Earth will come for you," and somewhere in the darkness between the stars, 12 ships continued their eternal hunt, carrying with them the unbreakable vow that no cry for help would go unanswered as long as humans drew breath in the void.